我哋一齊祈禱。
Let us pray.
主，我哋嘅上帝，你係全知嘅神，
Lord our God, you are all-knowing.
你知道我哋以前做過嘅、現在所想嘅，以及將來會變成點樣樣。
You know what we have done, what we are thinking, and what we will become.
我哋若犯咗錯，你都會用你嘅方法嚟到教導我哋。
You have your way to teach and discipline us when we have done wrong.
若然我哋真係被你指教時，你都讓我哋謙卑係順服喺主你嘅面前。
May we humbly submit to your teaching.
我哋咁樣禱告係奉基督嘅名而求。
In Christ's name we pray.
阿門。
Amen.
上星期咧，我哋開始講創世記雅各嘅故事。
Last week we started the story about Jacob in the book of Genesis.
我哋講及咧雅各佢嘅名個意思咧，有包括找住啦、代替啦，甚至欺騙嘅意思。
We talked about the meaning of the name Jacob, which means to grab, to replace, or to undermine.
而雅各一生第一個階段嘅時候咧，係真係名副其實活出找住呢個生命力。
In Jacob's early part of his life, he undoubtedly lived out how to grab on.
佢為咗想奪得哥哥去長子名分，佢不擇手段咁樣去找住父親所俾長子名分嘅祝福，要繼承亞伯拉罕、以撒族長嘅名分。
In order to obtain his older brother's birthright, he used all means to grab a hold of his father's blessing for the eldest son, so that he could inherit Abraham and Isaac to be the patriarch.
更能夠得到咧上帝賞賜俾全人類拯救嘅祝佑。
And to acquire God's gift of salvation for all humankind.
透過雅各同埋佢嘅子孫，耶和華佢嘅救贖會帶俾世界每一個角落。
Through Jacob and his descendants, God's salvation will be brought to every corner of the world.
但係呢個族長嘅祝福唔係話咁容易攞到喎。
But this blessing for the patriarch was not easily obtained.
係要經過考驗、經過訓練先至配得上呢個信仰祝福嘅福分。
He must endure trials and training to earn this right.
所以上星期我哋講到話有4個階段雅各嘅生命。
Last week we mentioned that Jacob's life can be divided into 4 stages.
咁咧第一個就係去找住啦。
The first stage is to grab.
第二咧就係今日我哋所講嘅就係被找住啦。
Second stage is what we're going to talk about this week, and that is to be grabbed.
嗱，上星期咧我哋講嘅時候咧就講到雅各佢夢見一個天梯，有天使上上落落。
Last week we talked about Jacob dreamed about, in his dream he saw the ladder going, reaching into heaven and angels going up and down on the stairwell.
耶和華應許會帶領佢翻嚟，並賜呢日地俾佢嘅後裔。
God promised that he would bring him back to his home and gave his descendants this place.
耶和華必常佢與佢同在，亦都會保佑佢。
God promised to be with him always and protect him.
上帝嘅應許係永遠唔會落空嘅。
God's promise will never fail.
信實嘅神必定會保守佢，看顧住佢。
The God who is faithful will surely keep him safe and watch over him.
同樣地，上帝都一定會保守你哋嘅添。
Similarly, God will also protect you and keep you safe.
所以無論世界發生乜嘢事，
No matter what happens in the world,
天地會變，股市樓價會變，
heaven and earth will change, the stock market and the real estate will change.
我哋身體、我哋子女都會變。
Our health and our children will change.
但係神嘅應許、神嘅信實、神嘅愛係永遠不變嘅。
But God's promise, His love and His faithfulness will stay the same.
我哋透過雅各故事，我哋就會見到神佢嘅信實。
Through the story of Jacob, we will be able to realize God's faithfulness.
嗱，雅各咧長途跋涉，由以色列南部拔士巴嘅書伯嘅地方一路上到咧哈蘭，即係今日土耳其嘅東南部嘅地方。
Jacob traveled a long distance from the south of Israel in the area called Beersheba all the way up north to Haran, which is in the southwest part of today's Turkey.
全程差唔多係1000公里，步行要起碼4至6個星期嘅時間。
The whole journey is about 1,000 kilometers and takes about 4 to 6 weeks of walking to reach Haran.
我哋知道咧，雅各佢離開 為咗係逃避哥哥嘅追殺，
We know that Jacob left home to run away from his brother.
而佢父母亦都吩咐佢你去到哈蘭去娶老婆。
His parents also instructed him to find himself a spouse in Haran,
唔好咧喺別是巴揾。
and do not find his spouse in Beersheba.
有啲似咧加拿大都有啲中國人或者印度人或者伊朗人咧，佢哋翻返去自己故鄉去娶老婆。
It's just like many immigrants in Canada that they will go back to their hometown in China, Iran, or India to find a spouse for their children.
但係今次雅各翻去嘅心情唔係去揾老婆咁興奮，
But the mood that Jacob is in wasn't to find himself a spouse. He wasn't excited at all.
而係為咗怕哥哥嘅報仇，心境係恐慌又有混亂嘅。
He was very afraid of Esau's revenge. He was in panic and confused.
當中又有孤單又有寂寞，
He was all alone and feeling very lonely.
再加上人生路不熟，去到嗰度點知道邊個係舅父呢？
And on top of that, he was unfamiliar with the place and the people. So how would he find his uncle?
當時又冇照片喎，就算見到自己親戚都唔知道邊個係親戚啦。
There was no photo at that time, so even if he met them, he wouldn't even be able to recognize that this is his uncle.
所以好多嘢喺唔知嘅裏邊咧，我就睇到上帝佢嘅帶領啦。
So oftentimes in situations of many unknowns, we will experience the guidance of God.
雅各都唔知行咗幾多日幾多夜，有一日終於見到有一口井啦。
Jacob probably did not know how long he has been walking, how many days, but one day he came to a well.
喺中東乾旱嘅地方，有井就會見到有人㗎啦。
In the dry environment of the Middle East, where there is a well, there will be people.
佢見到井嘅時候，就同啲人傾偈，就話：啊，你哋喺邊度嚟啊？
When he saw the well and he met people there, he started talking to them and asked them where they're from.
啊，冇諗到放羊嗰啲人就話：哦，我哋從哈蘭嗰度嚟㗎。
To his surprise, some of the shepherds told him that we came from Haran.
哈蘭係一個古都，人口都有一定嘅數字，都未必識得佢舅父㗎喎。
Haran was a capital at that time and with a sizable population, so he cannot be sure that everyone knew his uncle.
於是咧，雅各就問佢哋話：你認唔認識拿鶴嘅孫拉班呢？
So Jacob asked them, "Do you know the grandson of Nahum, Laban?"
佢哋居然會認識喎，
They actually knew his uncle.
仲話俾佢聽話拉班咧唔單止平安，説話當中仲講俾佢哋聽。
So they said that Laban, his uncle, was well, and while they were talking,
佢話：你睇佢個女拉結帶緊羊過嚟啊！
they told him, "Look, here comes his daughter Rachel with his flock."
哇！世界上係咪真係有啲咁巧合嘅嘢呢？
How many coincidences can there be in the world?
佢哋遇到人又識得拉班，而且拉班個女現在就行緊過嚟喎。
Jacob met people from Haran, and these people know about Laban, and at the same time, Rachel showed up.
呢個唔係上帝嘅信實，會係乜嘢嘢呢？
If this is not God's faithfulness, what will it be then?
你睇到上帝係與佢同在。
We can see that God is with him.
我自己都親身遇咗唔少上帝去保守同埋帶領。
I've also experienced God's protection and guidance on many occasions.
上星期同大家分享咗我曾經喺埃及西乃山奇妙嘅經歷。
I shared with you all last week my amazing experience in Egypt and Mount Sinai.
上次咧唔夠時間同大家分享，我上西乃山嗰段嘅路程又遇到神嘅祝福。
I did not have time to share with you last week what happened as I hike up the mountain of Mount Sinai, how I encountered God's blessing.
我講到咧喺山腳嘅時候咧，我遇到兩個澳洲嘅女仔，我哋一齊行上山上邊喎。
If you remember, I met two girls from Australia at the foot of the mountain, and we hike up the mountain together.
我哋行咗1個鐘頭多啲嘅時候，我就發覺，咦，點解突然間好似我全身嘅精力好似消耗得七七八八呢？
After an hour of hiking, I felt that my energy was almost all drained, like I have no more energy,
就好似車冇電油一樣。
like a car running out of gas.
我明明食咗大碗嘅意大利粉，點解而家冇晒力嘅？
Before the hike, I ate a big plateful of spaghetti, but how come I am so lethargic now?
原來之前嗰日 我自己咧因為飲咗當時嘅水咧，就肚瀉咗7次，冇晒體力。
In fact, if you remember, I have drank some of the local water, and therefore I got episodes of diarrhea. So that is what caused my energy to be so drained.
我後嚟行10分鐘，要休息15分鐘。
I have to walk for 10 minutes and then rested for 15 minutes.
嗰兩女仔都好好，一直陪住我。
The two friends were very kind. They continued to stay with me.
但係我停咗太多次之後，我都唔好意思，就叫你哋自己上去啦。
But I became weaker and we have stopped too many times. I felt bad, so I asked them to go on ahead without me.
佢哋堅持唔肯要陪住我。
They were not willing at first.
但係後來同佢講話，上帝與我同在，你哋唔使驚，你放心去啦。
I told them that there's no need to worry. God is with me. You just go on ahead.
咁咧，終於咧，佢哋咧聽到咁講咧，佢就放心向上行啦。
So they went on ahead without me.
我咧當時咧就望住好靚嘅月光，就好似呢個咁樣啦。
At that time, it was dark, and I was looking at the beautiful moon and said,
我就祈禱同上帝話：上帝啊！今次我嚟旅行，特登係希望上去西乃山嚟到過夜睇日出，但係我而家完全冇晒體力，點算呢？
I prayed to God and I said, God, my hope on this trip is to camp on Mount Sinai to watch the sunrise, but now my body is so weak. What do I do?
喺我失望之際，祈完佢一打開眼，離遠就見到有啲微微嘅燈火喎。
In the midst of my disappointment, I saw a dim flickering light some distance away.
係咩嚟嘅咧？我就好好奇啦。
What was that? I was very curious.
於是咧，我朝住個燈火咧喺度行去啦。
So I walked towards the dim light.
原來係一個帳篷，裏邊有人咧喺黑暗當中裏邊係賣熱茶喎。
When I got there, I saw that there was a tent and there was a man selling hot tea under the tent.
飲咗幾啖熱茶之後咧，我就同佢分享咧，我上唔到山嗰種嘅困苦啦。
I drank the tea and then I shared with him my disappointment, how I could not make it up the mountain.
於是咧，佢就話：點解你唔坐駱駝咧？
So the man said to me, how come you don't ride a camel up the mountain?
我話呢度夜闌人靜，去邊度揾駱駝啊？
And I said to him, where would I find a camel in this middle of nowhere?
咁嗰個商人就話：我帳幕後邊就有一隻啦，我可以帶你上去。
And the man said to me, he said, I have one at the back of the tent. I can take you up the mountain.
哇！我即刻咧感謝上帝，真係上帝幾咁奇妙，知道我個需要。
I thank God immediately because God was really wonderful. He knew my needs and provided for me.
唔單止賜俾我有一個駱駝，仲孭埋我同埋孭埋我個20磅嘅背囊一齊上去山頂。
God provided me with a camel to carry me and my 20-pound backpack up the mountain.
所以你哋話上帝係咪一個信實嘅神呢？
Can you see? God is faithful.
雅各雖然未見過佢個表妹拉結，但一見如故，見到佢嘅時候即刻大喊出嚟。
Even though Jacob has never met his cousin Rachel, but when they saw each other, Jacob just burst out crying.
話呢場眼淚都忍咗好多個星期咯。
He could not hold back his tears anymore.
以前想揾人安慰都揾唔到，想喊都欲哭無淚。
In the past few weeks, there was no one with him, no one for him to rely on. Even when he wanted to cry, he couldn't even shed a tear.
今次見到一個親戚，真係見到自己人，忍唔住喊咗出嚟啦。
Now that he saw his own family, he let it all out and cried his heart out.
我哋睇到聖經嘅形容係非常之有人性嘅。
The description in the Bible is very human.
本來好堅強、好決絕嘅雅各，而家經過逃難同神相會之後，幾個星期孤單嘅路程，終於面對自己嗰種受挫嘅心境啦。
Jacob started out to be very stubborn, firm, and very strong, but through his running away from home, his encounter with God, plus a few weeks of solitary journey, he finally came to the point that he has to face up to his own frustrations and failure.
拉結知道之後咧，就即刻返屋企話俾爸爸聽啦。
Rachel then quickly went home and told his father Laban about Jacob.
拉班知道外甥返嚟嘅消息，非常之興奮地迎接佢。
Laban welcomed and received Jacob into his home.
雅各1:5-10嘅將整個情由咧講晒俾佢聽。
And Jacob told Laban every detail of how he come about to arrived in Haran.
見到舅父有如見到自己媽媽一樣咁親切。
He felt really close to his uncle as if he was talking to his mother.
咁咧雅各住咗1個月之後咧，拉班就同佢講啦。
After being with Laban for about a month, Laban said to him,
你雖然係我骨肉，你豈可白白咁服侍我？你話俾我聽，你要啲乜嘢工價咧？
Laban said to Jacob, you shouldn't work for me for nothing just because you are my relative. How much pay do you want?
拉班有2個女兒，大嘅叫利亞，作者咧形容佢咩咧？
Laban has 2 daughters. The older one's called Leah, and she was described to be
利亞嘅眼睛沒有神氣，拉結卻生得美貌盡秀。
Leah had lovely eyes, but Rachel was shapely and beautiful.
嗱，呢個英文嘅 lovely eyes， 原來喺原文希伯來文亦都可以解作係冇神氣或者弱喎。
In English, this lovely eyes can be explained in Hebrew to mean that it's dull or weak.
大家知道，如果個眼睛冇神氣嘅話，俾人一種感覺係冇志向啦，冇盼望啦，對人生冇目標啦。
You all know that when the eyes are dull, it gives people a feeling that this person lacks ambition or hopeless or have no purpose.
甚至咧好容易俾人哋蝦喎。
Or maybe even easily manipulated or bullied.
但係相反地，如果我哋嘅眼睛係有神氣嘅話，俾人種感覺係明亮嘅眼睛，有生命嘅抱負。
Conversely, when our eyes are bright and spirited, it gives people an impression that we have a passion for life.
對事情有見解、有分析，甚至有智慧。
We have opinions, we have understanding, and we have wisdom.
唔知大家自己有冇留意自己嘅眼神俾到人一個乜嘢嘅印象呢？
Have you ever noticed the impression your eyes gave other people?
到底你嘅眼睛係活精打采嘅，抑或係有精神又明亮嘅呢？
Are your eyes tired and dull, or are they bright and spirited?
不妨望下鏡或者問下屋企人佢哋嘅意見。
You might want to check them out in the mirror or ask your friends and family.
一般人都話我哋嘅眼睛係靈魂之窗。
People often said that our eyes are the window to our soul.
我哋嘅眼睛可以話俾人聽，我哋係開心定係唔開心。
Our eyes will tell other people whether we're sad or happy.
或者我哋眼睛話俾人聽，令我哋對生命有盼望，定係冇盼望。
And they will tell other people whether we're in despair or we're hopeful.
當我哋睇人哋嘅眼睛嘅時候，都一樣可以辨別出嚟。
You can tell a lot from our people's eyes.
從 Psychology Today 呢個嘅心理學嘅研究當中裏邊，都話眼睛嘅瞳孔嘅大小同我哋嘅情緒同埋我哋動機有直接嘅關係。
In an article in the Psychology Today, research has shown us that the size of our pupils are directly associated with our mood and motivation.
若果利亞係嘅原文係用另一個解釋，就話有美麗嘅眼睛嘅話咧，
Another explanation for Leah's having lovely eyes.
咁樣個作者就想帶出妹妹就有生得有氣質、美貌迷人啦。
Then Rachel was described to have personality, character, attractive.
甚至咧有優越嘅特徵添。
Seemed to have more superior characteristics.
所以雅各係一個聰明嘅人，有大志嘅人，襯得起佢，梗係希望揾一個又醒目又能夠幫到佢嘅配偶啦。
Now Jacob was a smart man with big ambition. Of course, he would like to find a mate that could match his properties.
於是咧佢咧就愛上咗拉結啦。
And that's why he fell in love with Rachel.
所以佢哋同舅父就講啦：
So he asked his uncle,
我願意為你小女兒拉結服侍你7年。
I will work 7 years for you if you will let me marry Rachel.
哇！拉結聽到咧好開心喎。
Hearing this, Laban was full of joy.
一來個女可以嫁俾家姐嘅仔，
First, the daughter can be married to his sister's son.
二來咧又睇到雅各係一個好勤奮嘅人。
And secondly, he could see that Jacob was a very hardworking man.
仲免費同佢打工7年咁耐喎。
And he's now willing to work for him for 7 years for free.
對於雅各嚟講，睇住自己心愛嘅人，一年只不過好似過一日，7年都係7日啫。
And for Jacob, being with the person he loved, a year will only feel like a day, and 7 years will only feel like 7 days.
再加上哥哥以掃可能個心嗰條氣都仲未打消喎，留喺舅父度唔係仲好咩？
Plus, Esau was probably still quite angry with him, so now staying with Laban and being with the person he loved would be a better option.
所以雙贏嘅條件之下，雅各好快就過咗7年喺嗰度。
So in this win-win situation, 7 years pass.
時候到咗之後咧，雅各咧就同佢舅父咧就提親啦。
So when the time came, Jacob asked Laban for Rachel's hand.
咁咧拉班咧就應承咗佢為女兒咧擺設筵席喎。
Laban happily agreed and started preparing for the wedding feast.
點知咧拉班係將大女利亞帶入雅各嘅房間喎。
But who knew Laban put Leah into Jacob's room?
可能雅各嗰晚真係飲到醉醺醺，再加上咧燈火咧又好浪漫。
I believe Jacob was probably quite drunk that night, and the lighting in the tent was dark, dim, and romantic.
入咗房瞓計側邊嗰個，仲以為係佢心愛嘅拉結添。
He had no idea the one sleeping beside him was Leah.
點知朝頭早一起身一見到，哇！原來唔係我中意嘅拉結，係利亞。
Until he awoke in the morning, he realized it was Leah and not Rachel.
朝頭早上發現之後，自己梗係好嬲啦。
Jacob was obviously furious when he found out.
於是咧就同拉班講啦。
And he said to Laban,
你向我做嘅係乜嘢事呢？我服侍你唔係為拉結咩？你點解咁樣欺哄我？
He said, Why did you do this to me? I worked to get Rachel. Why have you tricked me?
今次雅各真正體會到俾人嗰種嘅感受。
This time around, Jacob experienced for himself how it felt to be cheated.
而且係俾自己最信任嘅人所騙添。
And betrayed by the people he most trusted.
係幾咁失望同埋痛苦呢？
It was painful and disappointing.
更加冇諗到舅父可以咁樣回答佢喎。
But he didn't expect Laban to answer him this way.
佢話大女兒仲未俾人，細嘅唔可以俾人。喺我哋呢個地方冇呢個規矩，你就為呢個婚宴咧，滿咗7日之後，我就將另外一個細女兒咧俾埋你，你再為我服侍多7年。
Laban said to him, It is not the custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older. Wait until the week's marriage celebration are over, and I will give you Rachel, if you will work for me for another 7 years.
舅父居然可以攞啲咁冇理由嘅理由。
Laban actually gave him such an unreasonable or lame excuse.
但係雅各伯同佢做14年喎。
Asking Jacob to work for him for free for another 7 years, a total of 14 years.
雅各冇去同佢理論。
Jacob did not argue with Laban.
佢今次深深知道人嘅後果係咩啦。
He knew this is the consequence of him being a liar.
今次真係自吃其果，遭受被騙嘅無情。
This time, he is reaping what he sowed on the receiving end of a ruthless lie.
如果而家呢個雅各係仍然係喺別是巴嗰個雅各嘅話咧，
If the Jacob in Haran is the same Jacob in Beersheba,
係去爭取、去找住、去競爭嗰種嘅性格嘅雅各嘅話咧，
who stole, who grabbed on, who was competitive, that was how he was back in Beersheba.
雅各會不理一切，會同拉結私奔。
If that's how he still was, he would probably ignore everything and elope with Rachel.
再唔同拉班咧係講廢話。
He wouldn't put up with Laban's nonsense.
以前嘅雅各相信會衝動咁離開哈蘭，翻去伯特利。
The old Jacob would probably impulsively left Haran, went back home and set up a family.
喺嗰度咧建立佢新嘅家境喎。但係經過神喺呢個伯特利同佢屬靈嘅經歷之後，雅各反而願意信服喺拉班佢嘅説話之下。
But after his spiritual encounter in Bethel, Jacob now was willing to submit to Laban.
咁7日之後咧，佢就娶咗拉結咧，就為佢嘅妻子啦。
After 7 days of wedding feast, Jacob married Rachel and then started working for his father-in-law for another 7 years.
再做多7年。然後咧，雅各咧就真係學習咗信服，唔係去爭取，而係唔去爭取自我為是、自我為中心嘅夢想啦。
Jacob learned how to submit. Not that he wouldn't fight for what he wanted, but rather he wouldn't fight for his own self-centered dream or ambition.
佢前後唔係為拉班打咗14年工喎，而係20年喎。
In total, he has actually worked for Laban for 20 years, not 14 years.
喺佢逃離拉班，而拉班追殺咗7日7夜之後，雅各咁樣答翻去外父啦。
When he ran away from Laban, and Laban chased him for 7 days and 7 nights, when they met up, this is what Jacob said to him.
我呢20年喺你屋企，為你嘅2個女兒服侍你14年，為你嘅羊群服侍6年，你又10次改咗我工價。
I had to work 14 of these 20 long years to earn your 2 daughters and another 6 years to buy your sheep and goats. During that time, you kept changing my wages.
若果唔係我個父親以撒所敬畏嘅神，就係亞伯拉罕嘅神同我同在，你如今必打發我空手而去。但神睇見我苦情同埋我個勞碌，就喺琴晚咧責備你啦。
He also went on to say, if the fearsome God worshipped by Abraham and my father Isaac had not been on my side, you would have sent me away without a thing. But God saw my hard work, and he knew the trouble I was in, so he helped me. Then last night he told you how wrong you were.
其實雅各做滿14年可以離開咯喎。
In fact, Jacob could have left after 14 years of labor.
但係佢冇，
But he didn't,
因為佢外父需要佢，
because his father-in-law needed him,
甚至利用佢。
even to the point of using him.
但係上帝仍然喺佢不幸嘅裏邊，包括10次改人工下邊，仍然祝福佢。
But God saw how Jacob was being treated and blessed him abundantly.
使佢個羊又壯又多。
Jacob's wealth increased, his flock grew.
雅各見到神嘅恩典，能夠喺人睇為不景氣喺逆境之下，仍然睇到神去大大嘅祝福。
Jacob knew and saw that he has received great blessings from God even in times of adversities.
如果雅各第一階段係去找住嘅話，
If the first stage of Jacob's life was to grab,
咁第2階段就係為拉班做牛做馬嗰20年，係學習到係被找住啦。
now in his second stage of life, Jacob was to be grabbed by Laban, laboring for him for 20 years.
喺呢個被找住嘅裏邊，去學習去釋放，學習成為軟弱嘅，仲要學習信服。
In this experience, he learned how to let go, to be vulnerable, and to submit.
學習釋放同埋成為軟弱，係對於好多有大志嘅人最艱難學嘅功課。
Letting go and being vulnerable are the 2 hardest lessons for people with big ambitions.
因為對於競爭型嘅人係要樣樣都想爭贏啊嘛。
Ambitious people are competitive, and when they're competitive, they want to win every time.
甚至咧，佢想每次都得人哋稱讚，
They want to be number 1.
想得到控制。
They want to win other people's compliment and to be in control.
無論係控制自己前途，或者控制自己子女嘅前途。
Whether it's to control their own future or to control their children's future.
競爭型嘅人最怕就係咩咧？就係失控啦。
People who are competitive are most fearful of losing control.
因為失控俾佢覺得係一個弱者，
Because when they lose control, they felt that they themselves are weak.
或者覺得自己係失咗自信，感到無助。
They have no confidence and they're helpless.
但係雅各呢20年就係學習緊呢個功課。
In the 20 years Jacob was in Haran, he was learning this lesson.
你話俾人找住就係學習失控啦。
To be grabbed on is to learn how to not have any control.
喺呢個失控嘅裏邊，明白到世界上有好多事情唔係喺我哋控制之下。
Only when you don't have any control will you realize that many things in life are uncontrollable.
喺我哋失控當中裏邊，建立我哋對神嘅信心。
When we have no control, we will start to build our faith in God.
記得上帝應承過話會保守佢，會有祝福佢嘅。
God has promised to protect him and bless him.
上帝有冇失言啊？
Did God keep his word?
上帝有冇失信啊？ 有冇啊？
Did God?
聽唔到喎，冇啦。
No, God did not. God did keep His promise.
上帝證明俾佢睇，只要忍耐，俾心機落去睇，你會見到上帝嘅信實同埋保守。
God proved to Jacob when he waited patiently, he would see the beauty of God's faithfulness.
喺我埃及之旅裏邊，我都以為我一切安排好晒。
For my trip to Egypt, I thought I had planned out every details.
邊一日去邊一度，坐巴士、坐火車上西乃山，或者翻去以色列翻多倫多，全部安排好晒。
When to go, where to go, by train or by bus, to Mount Sinai, back to Israel, and return to Toronto. Everything was well planned.
但當我不幸飲到當地嘅水嘅時候，肚瀉7次，我知道我想走都走唔到啦。
Unfortunately, when I drank some local water, I was immobilized with diarrhea and I was weak. I couldn't even move.
喺呢個當中裏邊，醫生話俾我聽，你冇事㗎啦。喺個8個鐘頭嘅巴士去到西乃山都冇事啊！我知道上帝真係信實嘅神。
After I saw the doctor who reassured me that you're going to be fine, and after a safe trip of 8 hours to Mount Sinai, I knew God was faithful.
當我去到西乃山嘅山腰，唔能夠上山嘅時候，我再次感到失控同無助。
When I was halfway up the mountain, I was immobilized by weakness. Once again, I have no control.
但係神賜俾我有駱駝，背起我同我背囊一齊上山。
But God provided me with a camel to carry me and my backpack up the mountain.
你話我服唔服啊？
How can I not surrender?
但當我以為自己好信服喺神嘅面前嘅時候，數算緊上帝嘅恩典嘅時候，突然間見到前邊有懸崖喎。
When I was kind of counting my blessings on the donkey and on the camel, and thinking, oh, how good I was to be totally submissive to God, and then I saw a cliff up ahead.
我就見到喂駱駝準備跳落去咯喎。
And I see that the camel seemed to be wanting to jump over the cliff.
大家知道駱駝係一樣好大嘅一個動物嚟嘅，
You all know the camel is a big animal.
佢個頭同埋頸已經準備伸出去懸崖啦。
Its head and its neck has already stretched out over the cliff.
而駱駝嘅主人咧，佢居然喺我後邊喎，
The master of the camel was behind me,
就係咁吱吱吱吱叫喎。
and he was making that kind of sound to guide the camel.
我大聲就話：喂，駱駝準備跳啦，我跳唔跳出嚟好啊？
I screamed, I said, the camel's going to jump. Do I get off here?
嗰個老闆就話：唔使驚，唔使驚，駱駝行咗20年㗎啦。
The camel said, the master of the camel said, do not be afraid. The camel has been walking this path for 20 years. It's going to be fine.
原來呢隻巨大嘅駱駝係需要將個頭伸出去懸崖嗰度，然後轉彎轉上去，先至係可以繼續行。
I then realized the big camel must stretch out its head and its neck over the cliff in order to make its body to turn the sharp turn on the narrow path along the cliff.
今次我真係學習到咧，失控當中裏邊要信服神係會保守嘅。
This time I learned I must really submit to God when I have no control, because God will keep me and protect me.
各位，你有試過被人抓住、被人控制你嘅生命嗎？
Friends, have you ever experienced your lives being controlled by other people, to be grabbed on?
你有試過失控嘅感覺嗎？
Have you experienced your life spinning or spiraling out of control?
如果你有，我恭喜你，
If so, I congratulate you.
因為只有喺失控嘅裏邊，你先會感覺到釋放手嗰種嘅自由，放手嗰種嘅喜樂。
Because only when you couldn't control anymore, you will learn how to let go. You will learn the freedom of letting go and the joy of letting go.
而放手就會睇到神喺你生命當中所作工嗰種嘅喜樂。
When you let go and let God take over, you will then experience the joy of Him working in your life.
你就會見到上帝佢嘅大能係遠超過我哋嘅聰明、我哋嘅金錢、我哋嘅才幹。
You will see that the power of God far exceeds our cleverness, our money, and our abilities.
讓我哋向雅各學習釋放，讓神作工。
Let us learn from Jacob, let go and let God.
跟住落嚟，好想同大家分享一首詩歌，叫《你許可》，嚟總結我哋今日講到嘅要點啦。
I like to end by sharing this song with all of you so that it could summarize what the sermon says. It is in Chinese. If you know the words, sing along. If not, sit back, enjoy the music, and reflect on the sermon.
挫折有你許可，要讓祝福漫過，至死痛楚，要將生命加多。你破碎我一切，卻換上更多恩惠，榮耀路徑邊有淚涕？誰肯放棄自救？才將救恩釋透，葡萄並壓才得釋放，讓出新酒。人生到了絕處，才知道愛的深處，才能承載神恩豐滿天主。誰肯放棄自救，才將救恩釋透？葡萄並壓才得釋放，讓出新酒。人生到了絕處，才知道愛的深處，才能承載神恩豐滿天主。主啊，讓我哋